telling all sides of the story. This is The Rita Cosby Show.
I am talking about the Democrats in the United States because they are going crazy today after that word of a leak, as we know, on the draft opinion of the Supreme Court about Roe v. Wade. And what that would do is kick that decision, basically the issue of abortion, back to the states, to the state legislatures. The Democrats could try, even though it would be really remote, to try to pass some sort of legislation that would basically codify and allow for abortion in all 50 states. The chances of that are very slim because even there are a number of Democrats who are pro-life who would not vote in favor of that. But it looks like they're going to still try to push for that anyway. But in the meantime, the emotions, they are just going bonkers. And some of the things that have happened in the last 24 hours have really had me shaking my head. And I want to get your reaction to a lot of this and hear if you think this is an appropriate reaction, if you think that now Democrats are going to use this as the issue as they are running against Republicans, and it looked like they were about to take a trouncing in the midterms. I still think they will get trounced. I still think that the Republicans are going to be able to pull it out, especially in the House and maybe in the Senate. But Democrats clearly are trying to deflect and to basically say, hey, look over here. Look over at this issue as a distraction. Listen, abortion, the issue of abortion is very important to them. There's no question about it. But they are clearly trying to use this issue to override any of the other problems that they foresee in the country right now. And boy, there are a lot of them. If you look at some of the latest polls, and I am talking poll numbers with independents and with average everyday Americans on all sides of the aisle, the president has like a 90% disapproval rating with the way he has handled inflation. And we know in the last few hours, there was an interest rate hike by the feds. There's going to be more of that. The feds are trying to do whatever they can. But this is really a pivotal time where the economy is really in crisis. And we feel it. You know, when you go to the gas pump, you go to the store, you go to a restaurant, anywhere, you feel it. And the president knows it. He knows that right now inflation and the economy is an enormous issue, and that so many Americans have just had it up to here. And they feel disenchanted with his leadership. I mean, they don't feel inspired by his leadership, not just on that, but they look at the border, which is a leaky sieve. They also look at what's happening, of course, overseas. Ukraine is a mess. I finally heard word today that they're getting some of the howitzers that they were supposed to get. I was like, weren't they supposed to get that weeks ago? I mean, things are just still such a mess. And there is no sort of like sense of America leading the world almost in any level right now. And this president, you could tell, is paying a dear price for it in the polls. It's obvious. And these are polls by I'm not talking about just Republicans. I'm talking about like Democrats and independents are like, this is not the greatest president in history, according to many Democrats. And those are, of course, the ones who voted for him predominantly. And you look at all the numbers and it doesn't look good. So now many Democrats are just riding this issue of the Supreme Court leak, and not the leak. They don't care that there was something that basically breached the integrity of the Supreme Court. That was one of the worst leaks probably in Supreme Court history ever. They've never had one like this on an opinion that was in a draft form. And the fact that I was just hearing that Sam Alito was planning to have a speech. And guess what? He canceled the speech. He had an appearance and he had to cancel it. You can imagine why. There are protesters. There are now threats against members that are on the high court, a number of the high court justices. I mean, this is so crazy. And they're not saying a thing about that. Remember, they weren't saying a thing when Kirsten Sinema was being followed into the bathroom, the Democrat who wasn't voting the way the other Democrats wanted. It wasn't bothering them when somebody followed, Joe Manchin, the West Virginia senator, on a boat, on another little boat. They didn't care about that. They care about the fact that this decision is not going the way that they want it to go, and they will do whatever it takes. And some of the rhetoric has been absolutely unbelievable. Coming up in about 10 minutes or so, we're going to have here on the Rita Cosby Show, we're going to have great investigative journalist and founder of Just the News, John Solomon, is going to give us his take on the intense rhetoric coming from Democrats as a result of this leak. The fact that now everything is focused on Roe v. Wade. Forget about the border, forget about inflation, forget about crime, forget about a war. Oh, those are just little things. The most important thing they say is Roe v. Wade. And if you listen to them, it goes a lot further than Roe v. Wade. They basically are saying that the Republicans will take away every ounce of freedom that you have. And they are going after the MAGA crowd, at least President Biden is. And joining us now to talk about all of this is the great investigative journalist. He's also founder of Just the News, John Solomon. John, great to have you here on the Rita Cosby Show.
Yeah, good to be with you. What a busy news day. A lot of fun things happen today.
There sure are. Oh, my gosh. Well, John, I just played that comment from Elizabeth Warren, and I said she was about to pop a cork because, boy, she was like about to explode. What's your reaction to Democrats like her and others who are saying that this is like the be-all, end-all, and don't get fooled, is their comment, by crime or border or a war? No, this is the issue.
Well, listen, I think that's it. They have no other issues to run on. All the other issues Republicans have a preference on: the economy, national security, trust, and just general trust and competence. So this is their gift. Let's keep in mind, for 50-plus years, the Democrats had control of the Congress many times. They never passed a Roe v. Wade codification. They could have done it. They could have codified it. They could have done it. They didn't. They're going to use this to try to swing suburban women and some voters back to the party in the fall, because all the other levers they have, the economy, security, trust, competence, COVID-19, they have fumbled badly. And so this is sort of a Hail Mary for them. This is the best opportunity they have to make some ground up in an election that is tilting very heavily red. The real question is, we don't know how the court will ultimately rule. And there's a powerful counter message to this, which is this does not outlaw abortion. It simply gives it back to the states. And you'll hear this a lot if the court reverses it. Ruth Bader Ginsburg's own words, someone who supported abortion rights, by the way, saying that Roe v. Wade was a stretch. It was not good law. It was not a good decision by the court. RBG is one of the most famous people on the left, and I think the Republicans will blunt that, noting that even she thought the ruling was bad.
Yeah, and based on the issue of whether it's in the Constitution, whether it should go to states' rights, and a lot of people are saying, again, it goes back to the states. It doesn't outlaw it, as you said. It goes now to the states to decide. What do you make of also President Joe Biden, John Solomon? I couldn't believe this because, first of all, yesterday when they asked for his reaction, he didn't say a thing about the leak. He didn't condemn the leaker. He didn't say anything. It was like, oh, and he went right to using this issue because he needs a distraction too, clearly. So now he comes out today and he says MAGA is the most extreme group in recent U.S. history. What do you say to that? What was your reaction of what a broad stroke he is taking now?
Well, we've had this line, right? First, Hillary Clinton gave us the deplorables. Remember that? That was the first derision of the MAGA nation. Then there were the smelly Walmart people. Those were the FBI elitists, Pete Strzok and his girlfriend talking about it in text messages. And now Joe Biden's taking another crack at this. It's 80 million Americans. And on the day that the president chose to make this pitch, right, to take a different tack and to insult the entire 80 million base of the Trump electorate, his own party showed their own extremism. How did they do that? Last night in L.A., you saw these pro-abortion liberal activists throwing sledgehammers, bottles, rocks at police officers, injuring an officer, sending him to the hospital. It's kind of hard to tell the American people I'm against extremism when your own party's in the streets of L.A. wrecking police cars and injuring officers. I think most Americans see through it as sort of a cheesy throwaway line, just like deplorables, just like smelly Walmart people. You're not going to be able to get rid of the Biden or the Trump movement by just insulting it with elitist lines. He's not. And the more he does this, the more he reaffirms to the American people that he belongs to that top elite group in Washington who's so disconnected from everyday Americans who really are worried about, can they afford gas in their tank or do they have to buy food, which is going to come at. Most of the Democrats scoff at those worries. People in real America aren't scoffing. They're struggling. And I think these comments only go to further separate what used to be middle-class Joe, put him in the elitist category.
Yeah, it just shows such a disconnect and a disrespect. And like you said, it's like a diminishment of anybody who ever believed and still believes also in the Make America Great Again. And people are saying, God, it would be nice to have America be great again after a lot of the problems we have seen of late. What about also J.D. Vance, before I let you go, John Solomon? Because as we're looking, that was a huge victory, I think, for President Trump. And you look at all the people that he's basically endorsed at least recently, have either advanced to the runoff or won. And J.D. Vance is a perfect example. He was so far behind in the Ohio primary. Author, businessman, suddenly catapults 20 points. And he wins it last night in a big, big win. And he was a MAGA candidate. And that was all after being endorsed by President Trump. So what does that say about the Trump power? And is that maybe the reason why Biden tried to take a swipe going, uh-oh, you know?
Yeah, listen, he's 22-0 last night. The president picked 22 winners and didn't have a single loser. That's a hard record to match on a daily basis. He still is the leader of the conservative movement. He still has enormous sway. He's not going to win every one of these. I think in Georgia he may lose the Kemp race. Kemp seems to still be firmly up. We don't know, but the president will lose one here and there. But his ability to swing a race, to take a guy who was in third place and have him win in just 2 weeks after an endorsement, tells you that he has an enormous energizing effect on Republican and independent Republican voters. And anyone who wants to mess with him has to realize, hey, this is a formidable force. He has not been gone. 2 impeachments, the January 6th. He's still remarkably formidable because Americans like his policies. And I think that's the thing that Joe Biden is worried about. And even so, I had Lindsey Graham on my TV show tonight. He's sometimes pro-Trump, sometimes he's against Trump. He said, listen, Donald Trump, it's his nomination to get in 2024. He is the dominant force in the Republican Party right now. That's a pretty powerful statement from a guy that values his independence a lot.
Absolutely. And I think Joe Biden knows that too as well. And that's why he suddenly just kind of took a swipe at him. John Solomon, thank you very much. Always awesome to have you here on the show. The great investigative journalist, John Solomon of Just the News. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Rita.
Well, President Trump maybe needs to go back to the Taj Mahal and bet on blackjack or roulette or any of those games, because he's had a pretty good winning streak of late. And more than a dozen plus candidates that he has endorsed, he really helped their campaigns tremendously. And case in point, a huge win last night for a Trump-backed candidate, J.D. Vance. I had dinner with J.D. a couple weeks ago. He's a really interesting guy. And at that time, he had not been endorsed by Trump. And he even said to me, I hope that I get the endorsement because I know that that will be a tremendous windfall for me, that will be a tremendous victory because so many people love President Trump. And so soon afterwards, he did indeed get that endorsement. And that basically propelled him about 20 points. He literally moved up about 20 points on the roster, and he was trailing quite far behind in a pretty crowded Republican primary for Senate in Ohio. It's the Rob Portman seat. Portman is leaving. Senator Portman's leaving, so it's an open seat. And so there were a whole bunch of different candidates, and J.D. Vance, who is, Hillbilly Elegy, he's the author, he's also a businessman, a military guy, and he wasn't doing so well in the polls, and then suddenly he got the Trump stamp of approval, and boy, he skyrocketed, and last night he won in a very, very crowded field, and he was among a number of other people that won that got the endorsement from President Trump, and a lot of people are saying that last night was the beginning of sort of the test of Trump's power in the midterms and beyond. And of course, if the House and Senate, or House maybe Senate, or both of them turn, depending what we see happens in 2022 in the midterms right around the corner, just a few months away now in November. That could decide whether he gets in the race or other candidates get in the race on the GOP side. But it certainly is a test of Trump's appeal and Trump's might. And take a listen. Here is President Trump when he talked about his endorsement of J.D. Vance before the primary last night. Take a listen.
As you know, it was my great honor and distinction to endorse J.D. Vance for the U.S. Senate. He will be strong, he will be conservative, he will do what you want, and he's not going to let you down. He was a warrior, he was a great student, he loves your state, and that's why I went for him. So on May 3rd, go out and vote for J.D. Vance. He's going to be terrific.
And people voted for him, and he pulled out the primary, which he had to get through first in a very contentious field. And after J.D. Vance won just last night in Ohio in that primary, in the Republican primary, he thanked President Trump. Take a listen.
I have absolutely got to thank the 45th, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, one forgiveness example of what could be in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, remember 2019 when wages were going up and not down? Remember 2019 when workers were doing well in this country, not struggling terribly? Thanks to the president for everything, for endorsing me. And I got to say, a lot of the fake news media out there, and there are some good ones in the back there. There's some bad ones too, let's be honest. But they wanted to write a story that this campaign would be the death of Donald Trump's America First agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, it ain't the death of the America First agenda.
And that was a huge win. And guess who was clearly watching that was President Joe Biden, who the other night couldn't keep it straight if it was Ukraine or Hungary or if they were supplying javelins to Russia or to Ukraine. Remember, it was all these gaffes. But he was very clear against his animus to anything that is make America great again. To me, it clearly shows that he is so worried about President Trump and clearly sees that he is an enormous threat to President Biden. He sees that he still has a mass appeal, despite Stan, who just called us. But despite him, there are still so many people who have such incredible support for President Trump. And clearly the candidates that he was pushing for, if those candidates didn't win, President Biden would have been talking up high heaven today about it and said, oh, look at this one, look at this, would have called him a loser, would have done this. And instead, today, here he is at the White House, President Biden. There's so many issues in front of him, but he is consumed by President Trump. And he took a swipe, not only at President Trump, but basically his tens of millions of supporters. Take a listen.
What are the next things that are going to be attacked? Because this MAGA crowd is really the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history.
And then he went after Senator Rick Scott, of course, who's also a MAGA supporter, and he swiped at him too.
Senator Rick Scott of Florida, United States Senator, who's leading the Republican National Senatorial Campaign Committee, released what he calls the Ultra MAGA agenda. It's a MAGA agenda, all right. Let me tell you about this Ultra MAGA agenda. It's extreme, as most MAGA things are.
Wow. Boy, this president is worried about President Trump, and I think he should be. 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. Let's go to Norm on line 7. Norm, your reaction to the fact that President Biden said the MAGA movement is probably the most extreme political movement in American history.
Hi, Rita. Concerning Biden going after MAGA Nation, never in my life have I seen a sitting president going after 80 million of his oppositional voters. That is a dangerous precedent. These Democrats would rather Americans destroy each other rather than concede loss.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. They will go after anything and everything. And what I don't like also, Norm, is it's condescending. And it brings back again like the Hillary Clinton basket of deplorables. Like to me, it was like such a if you don't agree with me, well then you're lower than I am. And that's sort of the whole way that I think many of the Democrats, and clearly President Biden by his remarks and others that have made similar remarks in recent years, in recent weeks, it's just a condescension. And just like you said, it's so stupid because there are so many people out there that are part of this movement. What about trying to embrace them? If you're a smart guy, you do it in a nice way as opposed to swiping them and alienating them. Hey, Norm, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, what do you think? That's a question, Norm.
I think we're going towards a very bad period in the future because of this, and I can see a lot of similarity to things that happened. I've said this to you in the past about things that happened in 1861. I can definitely see that. It's a very bad situation when you have a president basically telling people who don't, for all the people out there who don't agree with me, you're bad people, and we're going to get you.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And I think that's really bad. I never saw Trump do that. I saw Trump going after his opponents, the other politicians, in his usual manner, but I never saw him going after Hillary followers.
Right. Can you imagine, like, if he had said, gosh, anybody who believes in her is the most extreme person in the entire world, every single one of you. I mean, it's like, first of all, it's so alienating. It's so condescending. And it's also arrogant to think that he doesn't need those voters. Like, they don't matter in America in his mind, and they don't matter in an electorate either, from an election standpoint, Norm.
And what's really scary, I think, is what I find really scary is the press will support Biden on this. And yes, we do have WABC, we have Fox, we have Newsmax, we have other, but it's few and far between in a Democrat supporting liberal realm out there. And I honestly, I think the press will support beating Trump supporters in the street, killing them. I mean, I really do. I think that they'll find a way to just... Wow,
you think that they hate them that much?
Yes, I think they hate them that much.
But you know what's interesting, Norm? In some of the polls of late, it clearly is showing that he's not doing well. And it's not just with Republicans, it's with independents and Democrats too as well. And it's like it's in every single category. I mean, it's like on inflation, again, I was telling you, it was close to 90% in this country think he's not doing a good job. And that's a lot of independents in that number too as well. And so I think they're looking for any sort of a wedge issue that can separate anybody who might think about going to the Republican side because they're so disenchanted with this president. So I do think they're looking at the tea leaves. And yes, I do think a lot of people in the media are clearly in the tank for Joe Biden. But I also think of late we've seen a few more of them at least asking different questions and what flavor ice cream are you eating? For a long time, it was like, is he getting strawberry or pistachio, And by the way, I like pistachio better. But other than that, he's also always basically getting a free pass. But of late, they have been saying, hey, listen, what about the border? What about COVID? The facts were so clear, they sort of kind of had to hammer them, So I think that there's more than meets the eye. And I think right now, he needs anything he can do to deflect from his bad numbers. And he's going to go after this Roe v. Wade leak, and he's going to go after Trump, anything that will take away from where he is at right now in the polls on almost every single issue. Norm, great call. Thank you very much. Let's go to Carlos on line 8 from Texas. Go ahead, Carl.
Hello, good evening, Rita. I usually call from Yonkers, but we have a little crisis here at the border. So many agencies here have been deployed. Now, Stam is very uninformed. He has never worked immigration. He has never been an immigration officer. And probably he has never been at the border like Joe Biden, so he doesn't really know what's going on.
You're talking about Crazy Stan, who just called in, who thinks Joe Biden he's like the only American who thinks Joe Biden is the greatest thing since sliced bread, right, Carlos?
Yes, but here at the border, we're basically expecting an avalanche, an invasion. However, a court to talk about the abortion issue. Gavin Newsom said today that if men were able to get pregnant, this wouldn't be a conversation. But Gavin Newsom, President Biden, Cory Bush, and other people have been telling us for months now that men can get pregnant, that Leah Thomas is actually a woman, that non-binary people can get pregnant, and we actually call those people birthing people. So it's not a woman's issue anymore. It's also a man's issue. So this issue exposes their hypocrisy and duplicity when it comes to women's issues.
So,
and
your point,
don't really care about women.
And Carlos, so your point is that, that they're happy to kind of make everything a gender neutral, but yet on this issue, they want to try to rile up the female base.
That's right.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Now, by the way, you're at the border now. Where are you at the border exactly? What part?
In El Paso.
You are. And what's going on there? By the way, as you're calling from Texas, I appreciate it because I know that you're a former law enforcement border patrol guy. Tell me what's going on there.
Well, basically, there's a lot of human smuggling and human trafficking, and also a lot of drug trafficking. Some different agencies have been deployed from the federal government, including, DEA agents and other agencies, one of which I'm a part of, in order to stem the flow of illegal activity. Plus, they expect the end of Title 42, and once Title 42 ends, we're basically expecting an avalanche. All the sources of information in Ciudad Juarez and Mexico have said to us that these people the cartels already have caravans upon caravans of people. So once Title 42 ends, you're going to see illegal immigration into the United States like you've never seen before, ever.
Wow. Carlos, I want to get your reaction as we're talking about the Roe v. Wade and the fact that Democrats are like, oh, none of that matters. Immigration, border doesn't matter. That was basically a phrase from Dick Durbin I was watching today. Like, none of that matters. This individual rights issue matters. They're trying to minimize what's going on in the border, I think, because they know it's so bad. What's your thoughts? So when you hear Democrats try to put it on the back burner and make everybody try to look somewhere else?
Well, I have to say it's a good strategy on their part because they basically have no issue to run on for the elections. Crime is up all over the United States. Inflation is up. Police officers are being killed left and right. Almost 73 last year, a 41% jump, if I'm not mistaken. So since they have no issue to run on, they're using this abortion issue as their primary issue. And they're going to focus on that issue until November. I mean, even though at many points in the past few years, they have had the votes to codify abortion law, they don't want to do it because they want to take this issue and use it and squeeze every single drop they can out of it in order to win some votes.
Yeah, no question. Carlos, thank you for calling in. And do me a favor. By the way, tomorrow night, everybody on the show, we're going to have George P. Bush, Texas Land Commissioner, who spent a lot of time and knows a lot about the border as well. And he's going to be on the show talking about the border and other stuff like that. But Carlos, do me a favor, call us tomorrow night too, with any updates of what you're seeing there firsthand. It's always great to get your perspective. And since you're down there, please give us a call back tomorrow night and tell us what you're experiencing and seeing, because we want to be able to give everybody a front row seat and talk about what's really happening, not what the Democrats don't want us to see.
All right, I'll try to do that if I'm not busy. Thank you.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you very much. And also be safe there, my friend. Very, very much. Great call from Carlos calling in from Texas, one of our listeners, which is great to hear from. Thank you. What a great, great American. When we come back, everybody, we're going to continue with your calls. What do you make of the fact that, don't worry about border, don't worry about inflation? The only thing that matters is they say now every single Republican is taking every single right away from you. It doesn't matter what it is, even if it has zero to do with Roe v. Wade. It's going to be taken away from you. That's the big message. And they are screaming it and protesting to high heaven.